Hello, I'm talking to Richard Waring today about his new company, WARING Amplification. Richard, you've got your new line of amplifiers, WARING Amplification. Tell me all about them.
Basically, the business started about 12 years ago, mainly as repairs to band equipment and hi-fi. And the idea behind it when I set up my business was that I would actually work on that primarily, but using the funds from the repair side of things to help finance the new project, which I was working on from the beginning, really, of designing my own amplifiers, guitar amplifiers for musicians. And I was hoping that I would have, within 3 or 4 years, something that was ready to roll. But all things being equal, it didn't work out like that. No. First of all, the costing of actually financing the project was quite a lot bigger than what I'd originally anticipated. Then ill health caught up with me. Ended up having a spell in hospital, and I did have a spell when the business had to shut completely, and so consequently it was all set back. So I had to take stock really of where we were going, and decided to cut back on the repair side. Obviously that had a financial implication as well, less money coming on that side, but what it did do is it gave me the chance to actually get the project under control and actually move it ahead, actually start the development work, the actual manufacturing of the new amplifiers. And I found within 2 years I'd actually got back on track. There's a lot of work involved with registering a product and all this sort of thing, getting it to market, a lot more than I originally anticipated. So it did take more years and a long time to actually get to that point.
What is the magic about valve amplifiers? Why do musicians love valve amplifiers?
It's that warmth of sound that you don't get with a solid state amplifier. As good as they are, I mean, you can make some very good solid state amps, but they don't sound like a valve amp. There's something unique about a valve amp. It's that warmth of character of the sound, and it's something that I think most musicians desire really when they're actually playing, to actually listen to that quality, that warmth of a good, well-made valve amplifier.
Is it to do with second harmonic distortion, which is an even harmonic, and when they're overdriven, it doesn't sound harsh, it sounds extra warm?
Yeah, there is a difference between a valve amp and a solid state amp in that respect, yes. And the distortion you get with a valve amplifier tends to be more pleasant than it does with a solid state amp. So yes, there is that. But I think also it's just the characteristics of valves. Generally, you can magic the effect on a solid state amp. You can do it by digital means these days, but you're never going to quite hit the mark of the real thing. And so when you actually listen to that real valve amp in the studio, played with a good musician also, then you still don't quite get that with anything that's digitally remastered or produced, or even from solid state amps. You know.
There's a degree of nostalgia, isn't there, as well, because all the greats had valve amps. And I think musicians perhaps think to get that sound must have a proper valve amplifier. And to some degree they're right, aren't they? They're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So it's quite brave of starting off a new line nowadays with valve amplifiers. What about your competition? Who makes valve amplifiers now, apart from the Chinese?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, there are, to be fair, there are quite a few valve amps out there. I would say the majority are mass-produced, even using valve amps, and the Chinese are very good at doing that. They can produce many. Some of them actually, not knocking it, some of them are pretty good, but they are still mass-produced. And one of the things I have found doing the service side of things over the years, having repaired a lot of this stuff that's on the market, is that the quality is not always there. Printed circuit boards and valves don't go together very well. They're convenient for manufacture, but give them a few years and they're full of dry joints.
Yeah,
and
heating and cooling down.
Heating and cooling,
Yeah.
cracked printed circuit boards, dry joints, recipe for trouble. And so that's part of the thing, whereas a hand-built amplifier will, obviously it's more expensive to produce, but it does last longer.
And musicians do form an attachment with their amplifiers, I know that.
Yeah.
They form a very close attachment to the amp, and presumably they form an attachment to the company that's making the amplifier. And in your case, they can approach you directly and say, my amp's doing this, and you'll mend it for them, and they know it's going to go on for another 10 years without attention.
Yeah, there is that. I mean, I think, yes, you could go and buy, not mentioning any names, but you could buy a ready-made Chinese amplifier, even a British amplifier or an American amplifier, but they're nearly all made in the Far East, manufactured in the Far East. And what I decided to do when I decided to set up the project and actually manufacture the amplifiers is that I don't want to just sell somebody an amplifier and say, right, goodbye. And even after the 1-year warranty, or whatever warranty you decide to set on it, you want to offer more than that. And so with my amplifiers, I will offer an ongoing service plan where somebody, obviously during the year's warranty, will get free replacements for anything that is not their fault, unless they go and smash an amplifier or something like that. But if it's a genuine fault and stuff like that, they'll get the full service backup. And then after the year, they'll get an ongoing, maybe yearly service checkup and follow-up, arrangement.
That sounds like a very attractive proposition to me, to know you can bring it back.
Always do that, and I think that's quite important, really, to people, especially if they are local. I mean, not all of them are local. I sold an amplifier to a musician in Manchester.
Great.
But even then, he knows if he has a problem, he can get it couriered back to me, and I'll deal with it.
And do musicians like your amplifiers? I know you haven't sold that many yet, but the ones that you've sold or offered to people to try,
yes,
do they like the amplifiers?
And I have actually had quite a few musicians in the project giving me critiques over the years, because I think that was one of the things I set out to do, to try and produce an amplifier that's not only looks nice, but actually does what the musicians want. Because there's no point in building an amplifier if it doesn't actually come up with the goods. It doesn't actually produce the sound that the musicians want. So one of the things I always invited musicians to give me critiques on it. And over the years, I've had many coming into the studio, and some amplifiers being used on recordings as well for albums, where the musicians can take them away and try them out and see what they think. And then also give me that critique and say, well, I like this, but I don't like that. And, and over the years, we've trying to refine it and actually produce an amplifier that comes up with the goods. Tell
me about the range of amps that you make currently.
Basically, at the moment, I've got three amplifiers in my range. That's my starting range. The basic one, the entry level, is called Liquid 7, which is basically a 7-watt amplifier, but only has a single channel. So it's kind of like all things kind of fitted into the one channel, where if you play it at a sort of a lower acoustic level, it is quite acoustic. But you can drive it and maybe put a pedal on it. You could actually drive it with a boost switch, which actually then gives you a more rock sound to it. So you've got a bit of both, but obviously through one channel. Then you go to the...
When you say one channel, you mean one input channel?
One input, and one physical channel in the amplifier.
Right, a straight amplifier,
yes.
No effects?
No effects, no. Not, in fact, actually none of the amplifiers have any effects. Although the next level up, the Lava 15, which is the 15-watt amplifier, that has 2 inputs, although one physical input, but 2 channels, so it's switchable. between an ultra clean channel, which is pretty hard to overdrive really, it is an acoustic clean channel, and then a drive channel which is very different, much more rocky. So you can switch it with a foot switch or by mechanical switching on the amplifier, and that one obviously gives you more versatility because you can change between the clean channel and the drive channel instantly, and you can get a completely
Can you set the
sound.
level separately on the two channels?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you've got a gain control
go from
for both
rhythm to
channels.
lead, and
yeah. But those, the bigger amp also has a send and return loop, so you can put your own effects in, reverb, whatever, or plug a pedal in, whatever, and so you've got a bit more control over it. And that one gives you 15 watts output, although it is switchable as well, that you can have a reduced power level. There's something called triode pentode switching, which allows you to then use the triode mode, which actually gives you a lower power output, and sometimes that's quite useful. So you have that facility, and all of the amps in the range have that facility.
Do they? That's very unusual. I haven't heard that before. Do they switch the outputs are switched to triodes?
They can switch to, yes, switch
so lower
to,
distortion.
And yeah, it does change the sound.
It does change the sound.
And it is something that is very difficult to describe really, but it alters the headroom of the amplifier, it alters the sound that you get from it is slightly different in triode to pentode mode, you know. So, and the next, or the biggest amp in the range is basically very similar to the Lava 15, but 30 watt, and that's called the Molten 30.
What valves do you use to get 30 watts?
They use EL34s in the bigger
34s.
amps, yeah. The smaller ones use EL84s. So yes, you've got much the same on the Molten 30, but a bit more headroom, a bit more poke in it really, but all the same facilities on it.
Fantastic.
And you'll find that all of the amplifiers can run into pretty well any cab as well. Designed with 4, 8 and 16 ohm outputs, so you can drive virtually anything.
Do they have a line output as well?
They do, yeah. They have a DI out. All of the amps will have a DI out.
Is that a balanced output?
It's an unbalanced output.
On a jack?
On a jack.
That's what
but
musicians want.
basically with that, you get all the EQs, so it's the only thing you miss out is the master volume. So it's independent of the master volume, so you can feed that to a sound desk or something else, a slave amp or whatever, but you get all the EQ through the amp by running it.
So all the amps have got EQ?
Yes, they have.
All three of the range.
It's a slightly simpler one on the Liquid 7 to what it is on the bigger amps, but does the same things basically. Yeah.
What are your plans for the future? I think you mentioned you were thinking about making a line of hi-fi amplifiers.
Yes, I mean that's kind of on the back burner at the moment. I mean, all the time over the recent years has been spent getting these 3 amplifiers to market, and I didn't realise quite just how difficult that was going to be until I actually went through it. From the point of view that these days, and all the constraints that are put on us for manufacturing a product, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and so all the safety regulations, things like that have to be done. As a manufacturer, you have to be liable for your products, so I've had to go through all that. Getting it actually registered as well, so that I could register the WARING amplification as the brand for all the new amps. Registering that with intellectual properties had to be done. Registering the designs for each product you make has to be done, and it all takes time, you know. So anyway, that's in history now. That's done, sorted. If, as you say, I have been looking at hi-fi amps as well as a possibility, and I have actually got a prototype small hi-fi amplifier which delivers 15 watts a channel. And that is in progress, but then I'll have to do all the same things again for that one and any subsequent ones I do. One of the things I did do though with WARING amplification when I registered it is I allowed myself the scope to be able to do other things, so I didn't limit myself just to doing guitar amps.
Excellent.
I've included in other things as well, bass amps, hi-fi amps, speakers as well, because I do have matching speakers which are now on offer.
Yes, you haven't told us about your loudspeaker cabinets yet.
They are an addition that's obviously making it a nice range of amplifier heads. Many musicians would like a matching cab.
Of course.
So what we've made so far is a matching cab for the Liquid 7 and a matching cab for the Lava 15 and the Molten 30. Right. So basically 2 cabs which will cover that range.
So will the Lava 30 run into the same speaker cabinet as the 15?
Yes,
it will.
Yeah,
well, it'll take it.
The speakers actually that are in there, that they're standard in there, right, will run with all 3. Right. So actually the beauty of it is you could plug any of the cabs into the speakers that are there absolutely fine. If a musician might say, well, actually I don't want a cab, I just want a head, sure, which is fine, you know, and they can run it into pretty well any cab that they've got.
Can't wait to hear them. How are you off for stock if suddenly there was an influx and somebody wanted needed half a dozen amps? Can you rustle them up?
Just about.
Right.
I've got, obviously I had to do some initial manufacturing, which just before COVID hit, we were just at the point of launching, and that year in 2019 had all great plans to have a launch party. We were almost there. We had the first run of Liquid 7 amplifiers done, and the Lava 15s were not far behind. And we thought, yeah, we'll do a launch party. Probably 2020 would be the time when we'd actually kick it all into action. But it actually, in a way, it actually worked for me in one respect, that it gave me that space with no interruptions, no customers, to actually crack on and actually finish the manufacturing. And we actually came out of the other side of the lockdowns, and things were picking up again. And I actually had a range of Liquid 7s, a supply of Liquid 7s, a supply of Lava 15s, and a couple of speaker cabs ready to roll. And so we're there. We actually got something available. I
think you said something about your transformers, that you designed your own transformers for these amplifiers. Is that right?
Yes. What I did was I came up with my own plan, my own design, because the first generation amplifiers, and we're going back, rewinding now probably about 10 years in time, the first amplifiers just used off the shelf. At the time, company Danbury Electronics produced transformers, quite good ones, but again,
you're talking about output transformers.
Output transformers, yeah, and mains transformers, yeah, as well. Oh. And so they were okay, but you just have to buy what you can get.
Yeah.
And you get a transformer that, even something as stupid as, you know, it comes with open terminals on it rather than a through the chassis arrangement, things like that. You just have to get what you can get. So it's obviously a prototype, doesn't matter, but when you're producing something manufactured, you want it to be exactly how it's got to be, you know. And also getting something that has exactly the right ratings rather than something that's approximate, you know. So that was okay for the first generation, and then Danbury Electronics went out of business. So it was then that I approached the company that's making the transformers for me, and they said, yeah, we can do that.
Is that a British company?
British company up in Derbyshire, yeah. And they've been brilliant. All right, so it costs a bit more money to do that.
Can imagine.
But you can then get a design, get something made exactly what you want. And so we did one for each of the amplifiers, range of output transformers, range of mains transformers, and chokes and stuff like that. So we've got everything there.
That's really good.
And it's made exactly to order.
And where do you get your valves from? Because that's not easy nowadays.
No, the valves can be a problem, but a lot of the valves I've been using in the recent years are either new old stock stuff that comes from the Eastern Bloc mostly, which are very good. They might be 30-year-old valves, brand new, but they're ex-military grade valves, and you put them on the valve tester and nearly everyone comes 100%. Up absolutely brilliantly, you know, so they take a bit of beating. But you can't always get everything. Sometimes you have to rely on new valves too. And just recently we've had a problem because Chinese companies have gone out of business and the valve supplies have become difficult. We of course had all the problem with Ukraine and the trouble with Russia. Supplies and things like that have got difficult. There's a couple of companies still making valves, but they're so far behind now that everything's gone out of stock. Yeah. And the prices have doubled as well, which has made things more difficult. You know, so.
Have you got a bit of a stock in at the moment?
I do, fortunately, because thankfully I was buying up valves over the last few years wherever I could get them, and I do have a reasonable supply. I mean, it's not limitless, but it's...
We won't tell everybody.
Yeah, but I have enough to... Well, I have to also have enough for repairs as well.
Yeah, quite.
As well as my
but they're
own
so
amps.
reliable, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Valves are so reliable. People think they're not, but they are incredibly reliable.
They are, yeah, generally. I understand there is actually a new project being set up in the Midlands from the British Valve. They're actually starting to try and reproduce British valves again.
Wow, that would be wonderful.
Which could be very useful.
Yeah.
I've been in touch with them and spoken to the guy who runs the business. They're actually getting some of the old equipment that's been stored up for donkey's years that used to be Mullard. It used to be the Mullard proper machines and everything. And they've brought them back to the UK, set them up and actually cleaned them all up and got things working again.
This is the manufacturing plant for making valves?
For making valves, yeah. And so they are in the process of reproducing the original Brimar and Mullard spec valves. And obviously they will come at a premium, but they are going to be, you know, the proper valves, you know.
Real McCoy.
A real McCoy, you know. So I'm watching that one carefully because that could be very useful.
That's great, Richard. Well, thanks ever so much for telling us about the company. So let's have a look at James sussing out some of your new WARING amps.
We'd be delighted to hear from you if you're interested. Please get in touch either by email, phone or on Facebook to arrange a visit to our studio to try out any of these amplifiers and speakers which are now available for sale.